take us forward. I'm just going to remind you two things. The more you chat with us, the more we can have this conversation moving forward. So put something in the chat. If something's standing out, just highlight it and we're going to feel that. If you're on Facebook, do the same on Facebook, please. Just send a message and Kateco is fielding that space for us. And then we're going to have a poll sometime in between the session. Please engage with us on it. That data gives us so much input into the kind of work we need to keep doing on the background to push this work forward in organizations. So with that, Thembela, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Oh my goodness, I'm looking at my screen. It is just so beautiful to see all of us here. Thanks, Shah. I'm not sure why you're biting your tongue because I'm the one who always does that. It must be an important topic. You'll actually be surprised because I was telling Shah earlier today that for some reason, today I feel like I'm a bit not grounded. And I know that, you know, the issue, the topic that we're handling today is such an important one. And so that's why it would actually do, you know, like this funny thing in us. So yeah, welcome. We are so grateful to have you here. So as I'll just take from where Shah has ended. So today, we are actually looking at an important theme of how do we navigate the workplace through women's collective power. And the reason, as Shah was saying, the reason why we actually came up with that topic is because when we were going through our reflections in the past few weeks, we felt a sense of helplessness at times amongst us as women, as we were continuing to grapple with the issues that face us in relation to our work and within the context of COVID. And so because of that, we then decided to invite Barbara, who spoke to us last week, and I see that Barbara Kalimapiri is amongst us, and she spoke to us on exploring ways of how to build our own power as women so as to navigate the workplace. And I actually went back through the recording that we had with Babs last week. And I took away from that the challenge that she left us with of that if we want to navigate the workplace from a place of power, we must not expect that somebody else will do it for us. We must actually create our own power as women. And she gave us a number of options in which we can actually create this power. And one of those, which we are about today, is to actually find collaborators and allies that we can work with, because what we're finding is that when we try to do things just by ourselves, sometimes we get isolated, sometimes we get easily victimized. And so from that, we actually thought it would be very nice to have a series. In fact, for the next 3 weeks, we'll be having a series of looking at how to work with collaborators as a way to navigate the workplace. And as we were looking at this, one of the things we actually realized is that the one collaborator or ally that we don't always tap into is ourselves. I mean, if you look, I had an opportunity today just to revisit a booklet, a story booklet that we put together 2 years ago, which says there's more to us. And I was looking through the stories, and it was really amazing, the kind of things that are coming up, where a lot of women were saying they find it so hard to actually collaborate with other women. One young woman said to us, it looks like you, the older folks, were never ready for us. Because instead of looking at us as people that we can actually support, instead you see us as a threat. And so we actually want to change that and basically say there is a better way of looking at ourselves as women.
What are you doing, Manju? You're hating, mommy.
Yeah, Marjorie is actually having a good time. So that's the idea. Is one of the things that we're actually learning about, through this COVID, that, you know, as working women, our children, they are part and parcel of our lives, so we cannot ignore them. So anyway, we will find a way of collaborating with them as well. I think it's one of the topics we actually need to look at in one of the days. I remember that Ricky had actually challenged us on that before. So anyway, going back to what I was talking about. So we've actually invited two people, Lebu Muloto and Ntato Minyuku, and those who know Ricky, that is Ricky's sister, to come and talk to us and share about their own experiences, their own thoughts, the lessons that they've actually drawn of organizing or working collectively with other women, whether it is within their own work context or within the context, like of an industry level, as a way of navigating the workplace. So basically, they asked me yesterday when we were talking together with them as to what is it that you actually want to get out of this conversation. And I said, for me, if we can leave this conversation being empowered, at least having begun the process of empowering one another as women on how we can actually take advantage and tap into our collective power as women to navigate the workplace. So we actually gave them 3 questions they need to look at to help us in that journey. So they will actually share, I'm hoping that they don't have the PowerPoint presentations, but anyway, the idea is that they must share from their own experiences and stories. So the first question that we ask them to look at in the presentation is, why should women lean on the collective power to navigate power in the workplace? So why should we lean on one another as women? And the second one is they must share their own experiences in building collective power of women in their own workplaces and in their own industries. And the third one is what has worked and what has not worked for them. So basically the idea is that we want them to be as honest as possible, because we don't want you to live here and say, hey, in that Womaniko lunchtime connect space, they said I must do this. And you actually go and try something and you realize it is not working for you. So we want them to be honest about what is working. We want them to be honest about what is not working. And our hope is that we'll actually take the lessons that they will share with us and be able to say from what they've tried, from their own lessons, what is it that we can actually leverage on. The idea is that we don't just want this to be a talk shop or a talk show, whatever it is. We want it to be something that is practical, that we can actually work with. So on that note, I will invite our 2 speakers. As I always do, I said to them yesterday, can I introduce them? I will read. And the reason why I said that is that I know that, as women, we don't like bragging about our successes and everything. And then for us, we really take these conversations so seriously. So we go out and look for people that are really going to make an impact in our lives. So the first panelist that we have is Ntato Minyuku. As I said, for those who don't know, she was actually, Ricky tried to wrestle with her to say, you do not have a choice, you have to come. I will not say everything that has been written in Tato's bio. Go and look out for it on LinkedIn. But all I can tell you is that we have 2 women, and I call them powerhouses. First one, Tato is a corporate affairs executive. She is currently working at Shell as a country manager for government relations. That's not enough. There's something else that I've actually cut out of there. She is part of Women in Energy team, the vice president of the South Africa Commonwealth Association of Planners, and she has recently been appointed chairperson of the South African Maritime Safety Authority. There's a lot that you don't know about Ntato. When Ricky sent me the bio, I said, oh my goodness. Anyway, the second one is Lebu Muloto. She's coming from the IT industry. It's actually very interesting because both these industries are the 2 industries where we know that women are experiencing a lot of problems. So anyway, Lebu is a highly experienced professional in technology and business system integration, technology consulting, and IT program management, with over 16 years of working experience, working across public and the private sector. Lebu has an in-depth understanding of business dynamics and strategic challenges. She's able to work, influence, and negotiate across the business units and teams within the business to bring about changes. She is also a wife and a proud mother of 3 beautiful children. She regards family as very important, as it is a foundation of communities and nations. making work-life balance important as a working woman. Yeah, so that's the two women that we have amongst us tonight. So Tato and Lebu, welcome. The floor is yours. So we will start with Tato, so they will just present. So you will write on the chat whatever that comes up or that is emerging for you. So we've asked that both of them must just speak one after the other, and then we'll have a conversation after. Welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to us tonight.
Thank you so much for the intro. I'm just going to dive straight in. I don't have a PowerPoint. So I'm just going to speak from my experience and speak from the heart. You've given 3 very key questions. Why should we be leaning into our collective power? What are the experiences we've had building collective power as women, and what has worked and what hasn't worked? So I'm speak to this through a couple of stories and my experiences. The most recent one was being on a global call with colleagues sitting in The Hague and London. And in the middle of this call, in the middle of my presentation, my little one runs to the bathroom, which is adjacent from my office. And in my middle of my presentation, she's 3 years old, she yells, "Mommy, come wipe my bum." Now, in the context of COVID, these sort of scenarios are no longer cringeworthy, right? And everyone understood. And there was the woman in the call who said to me, "We understand, we'll hold and wait. We'll hold the meeting for you. Go do what you need to do." So the key, this is not what the workplace was 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 24 months ago. So the wonderful thing about COVID is that it has normalized the family within the reality and the identity of us as people, as workers, and as women. And this has been both for men and for women as well. I contrast that with when I joined Shell 7 years ago, and I took my then 4-year-old, she's now turning 12, almost the same age, to my office. She had to pick her up from work. I didn't have enough time between picking her up from work to take her home. So I brought her to the office with me. And the head of HR at the time said to me, "This is not a place for children. A child doesn't belong here. Why is your child here?" She effectively mother shamed me in the business in front of everyone. It was an open plan environment. So to speak about these 2 different experiences, fundamentally different experiences in the space of 7 years, can speak to this topic that we're talking about today and some of the key pointers I want to draw on. I think the first pointer is that when we speak about collective power, it's very important for us to understand that not all women share the same interests and perception about power. Whether you're dealing with issues around work-life balance, promotion, gender-based violence, flexi time, motherhood, sickness, performance management, or managing the bromance, these are just some of the issues that come up for me, it would be intellectually dishonest, and I think we've all experienced this, to assume that all women are on the same page about the use of power and about the need to act in a collective form of power. We do function as professionals, as entrepreneurs, as activists in a context of patriarchy, right? Some of us might have a more conscious and evolved sense of women and the importance of working together. Some of us might be at a different level where we still patriarchal princesses and we believe in the queen bee syndrome where there can only be one, or we still operate in a way where how we engage with other women is from a position of shaming, positional power, or even in some instances, competition, yeah, most of the time. So in my experience, women, when we lean into collective power, we need to be very discerning about who we're leaning into. we need to be very discerning about sharing the same ideological position as the women that we want to form collective frameworks with, collective partnerships with. Become a counterintuitive grouping when you have conflict of interest within the grouping, where you could be trying to create a community of practice or create a movement in an organization, but people are coming from different places around what they're trying to achieve. Some might be trying to achieve an individual aim, some positional power, some one-upmanship, some brinkmanship, and some might actually be aligned with the interests. So that understanding and discernment of the quality and the character of the people to form that collective power with is extremely important. Otherwise, it can become counterproductive. And it's important in forming that collective power to align across common interests and common goals, which means that the typical way that we work, I work certainly, is I've never been one of those people who looks for friendships in the workplace. I go to work, I have a lot on my plate because I still have to come home and do my second job when I get there. And so the workplace has not traditionally, for me, prior to probably the last 7-8 years, it was not a place where I saw it as a family in which to mobilize. I've had to learn how to mobilize because of the amount of the time. I spend more time at work than I do with my own family. And so I've had to learn that this place that you spend the majority of your time in, that your income is tied with, that your identity and your purpose and self-realization is tied with, then therefore has to become an environment within which you have agency, which has been a fundamental ideological for me. If I can just move to the second, and just finalize the first point. So in finding the right partnerships with women, there are different types of women and different types of relationships around collective power. There's relationships which are collaborations, there's allies, there's sponsors, there's champions, and this doesn't just need to necessarily be with women. It can also be with men around women's causes. Over time, because this is a journey, I have found over my 20-year career that the more able you are to create networks of relationship and influence and alignment within your organization, outside of your organization, the more influence and power one has over decision-making, policies, even directionality of individuals as well as institutions. And so I tend to have a set of concentric circles of collectives. I have them in my team, I have them in my workplace, I have them in my industry, I have them in the broader community. So for instance, I've set up a Senior Women Connect in Shell, at a broader level with the CEO of BP South Africa, outgoing Priscilla. Have set up the Women in Energy forum for initially it was the oil and gas sector. We've now made it bigger for the entire energy industry. And then even within my business, besides the Senior Women's Connect, it's very important that I sponsor and I champion younger women in the organization as well. And so I have a network of younger women who I sponsor and I champion and mentor as well. If I can just move quickly to the experiences of building collective power. Collective, it starts with the individual. And it starts with one of the key lessons I got from a mentor, which said that if you are the smartest person in the room, then there doesn't need to be anybody else in the room. And the idea there is, if you want to achieve something, then you have to take everybody else along on the journey. You could have the answers, you can have the solution, but the chances are you'll lose the majority of people if you are the singular expert with the knowledge and just expect everybody else to be co-opted into it. Now, journey and alignment, a lot of people don't want to talk about this, but alignment is a painful process. Alignment, taking people on journeys, coming up with aligned positioning these are powerful because everybody's coming from different places, and it requires a level of courage, one, to suspend your own ambitions and intentions, two, to suspend your judgment of other people, and three, an extreme amount of patience around timelines around what you want to achieve. And then finally, lessons learned from what works and what doesn't work. I must say that one of my biggest lessons is the importance of having both female and male allies, champions, sponsors in the women's cause. It's very important that women's collectives have male supporters and male sponsors in positions of power and influence as well. One of the things that I discovered in one of my workplaces was that, and this is from two components, was that one, the individual, based on their position and power, can effect change, right? But at the same time, where issues are so contested and sticky, then you have to almost build a momentum of movement over time around change. Where I can give that example is it was very easy for me as a member of EXCO when my country chair was setting up meetings at 7:30 to say, sorry, I'm not joining your meetings, I do school drop-offs. And then that became a standard. We no longer set meetings at 7:30 because he realized it was an oversight on his part because his wife does the drop-offs, he wasn't doing the drop-offs. But then when we started talking about the gender pay gap in the business, so the contested terrain, at a board level, I realized that the sole voice of saying, anecdotally, there is a gender pay gap, right? But then getting the male feedback, the senior EXCO feedback saying, yes, well, and it's an experience issue. Then I had to start perspectives around, okay, who's doing the data management around the gender information? What are the theoretical frameworks around gender pay gap? Which is why then I reached out to Ricky and people in other sectors outside of the organization. How do you look at these gender issues? And then who do I need to mobilize around who can influence the different board members and decision makers on the Social and Ethics Committee to scrutinize what the constraints and the barriers to fair and equal pay is in this organization. So I'll just leave it there as a set of some examples and some lessons and my experiences over time.
Wow, thank you, Ntato. Thank you so much for that. I like the fact that this is just so realistic. But I will not talk on what you have said because somebody else is going to come back after Lebu has spoken. So Lebu, the floor is yours.
Hi, Thembela, and hi to everybody on the call. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you so much, Thembela, for the invitation. And I think, yes, I haven't prepared a presentation, which I could very well do, but I don't particularly like that, particularly for the purpose to which we want to speak to today. And I really like the word reimagine, you know. It's been something that I've been thinking about now for a couple of years about, is this the workplace that we want to work in? Is this the kind of corporate that we want to work in, particularly as a woman and as a mother of 3? And part of it has been thinking about, is this the kind of environment that I want my kids to be in, Yeah, so I really like the word reimagine. And most importantly, it's about the collective, right? As women, we've seen movements of women and that have really revolutionized the way the world is, I think about, what we celebrate in South Africa in August, where women mobilized other women to fight for the justices in South Africa, and even women in England, and that's where women started voting. And it's about the collective power of women that can birth new changes in this world and in our workplace. So yeah, so that's my introduction. So thank you again. And I want to share about my experience, and I love what Nthato has shared as well. What a powerhouse, and what an inspiring woman, which, you know, I would love to learn from. So, you know, so it's really a good start. When I think about the questions, you've given us 3 questions as you've mentioned. And one of them, I'd like to start on the first one. Why should women lean on their collective power to navigate, power in the workplace? There's a lot of powers in that sentence. But I think, you know, as I thought about this question, I wanted to start first in you as a person. And you spoke about we're powerless, or, you know, we don't know what to do. And I think what I wanted to stress, and what I've learned as a woman, and particularly as a Black woman in corporate South Africa, is power starts with yourself, and with realizing your own power, with realizing your identity as a woman. And that's where it starts, because it cannot start anywhere else. It has to start within you and how you value yourself. And part of it is knowing your purpose, you know, that's very important. And knowing what it is that you're gifted in, and knowing what it is that you're talented in, even your space, and what it is that you want to grow into. That's really important to start building the power inside of you. And, you know, and I'd like to think of women as, you know, as a key. You know, men plant seed, right? But women really birth. And it takes a lot of pain. It takes a lot of, you know, feeling like, what can I do? I've done natural birth for all my 3 kids. So I kind of know, you know, what it takes to give birth. You know, and it's a process, but it brings in new life. And that's how we need to think about ourselves as women. We are a channel to bring in changes in our workplace. And the one thing that I like about what Miss South Africa said, it's about, you know, the former Miss South Africa is now Miss Universe. It's about occupying your space. You know, be willing, you know, be courageous enough to occupy your space, and knowing where you fit, you know, knowing where you fit in. And, you know, I always think of a puzzle piece, you know, or a puzzle, and knowing that you are the piece that needs to fit in there, and occupy it, know who you are, and get in there and occupy that space. And I think the second most important thing is also seeing the power in other women. That's very important, because at times when we look at other women, we look at the, you know, the outside part. We look at, oh, she's wearing a miniskirt, she must be this. Or she's having dreadlocks, she must be this. She must, you know. So it's about removing those unconscious bias that we have about ourselves, and really seeing power in other women, and how you can put it together and create a different world, you know, in our workplace. And I think the third one as well, it's what is your definition of success? Because it differs for every woman. You know, for me as a mother, it's important that I balance everything together. And the reality is sometimes you cannot have it all at one point in time. You might have to, you know, say it's important for me to have this, and at the next, you know, next week I must then be able to do something else. So it's important to define what success is. You know, is it to get to Exco? Is it just to influence other women? Is it just to build other women? Define that for you, so that when you get into the collective power, you know what it is that you're pursuing, and you're honest about it, and you can then gather into a woman. And it goes into what Nthato was saying, that, you know, the collective also depends on what each person wants to get out of it. So be clear on what success means to you as a person, so that when you get into the collective power, then it's clear that this is what you're pursuing as a woman, and as you pursue the agenda that which you want to progress in the workplace. And, you know, the key question is, why are we doing this? Firstly, we're in a man's world, right? and I don't want to say that, but it's patriarchal, right? When you think about corporate, it's patriarchal in nature and it's foundation. You know, it's meant for, you know, it was founded with that. And that's what we need to change as women, make it much more conducive for women who've got kids to be able to succeed in it. And that takes more of us in those positions of power. And I like that Ntato is there already. So, you know, she's got a lot to share on that. And to create a more equitable environment for women to thrive and to learn, right? And part of the equitable, it's, you know, she spoke about pay gap, you know, and we want to be able to create that and advance that. So that's why we need to, as women, to come together. And I think most importantly is to be able to support each other, to provide guidance, you know, to strengthen and empower each other. Very important. And one of the key things, it's to also be an outlet. You know, I can go to Thembela's office and I'm like, this man, you know, is getting into my nerves, and take it out, and afterwards get it back together again and say, okay, let's move forward now, you know. So it's about that, you know, so that then, you know, you don't get to be emotional out there. You can be emotional in the office, and then after that, get yourself together and go and further that agenda out there. And you know, and to have honest conversation, you know, and be able to have that space, you know, and be truly who we are in the workplace, because that's how women thrive. You know, we get together with a glass of wine and really pour it out there. And it also helps in the work environment to really have that conversation. And I think key thing is to make the change in the work environment. Yeah, and I think, you know, one thing that we overlook is that men do it all the time. Oof. Okay. Men do it all the time. I'd like to apologize. My network has been poor over the past couple of days. I called in. I hope everybody can hear me. Okay. Men do it all the time. Men get together for brides. Men get together, you know, all the time, and for the purpose of this. So for us to get together as a collective is very important, and we must pursue it with as much drive and passion as we can. And, you know, the second question is about experiences. One of the things is that I've had strong women in my life that, even through my promotion, at, you know, at organization, at Accenture, where I spent most of my career, I've had women that were supporting me, that spoke for me, you know, in those sessions, you know, and I'm grateful for that, because it's been women. Yes, I was hired by men, you know, most of the time, but really the promotion came from the women that was supporting. So it's important for us to support each other. I think, you know, at Accenture, and one thing I've realized is that the higher you go, it's the more you need the collective. You know, sometimes at lower levels, you don't realize it as much, you know, because you can do it by yourself, you know, but the higher you go, it's the more you need that collective. And speaking to a number of women, you know, in higher positions at a CEO level, that's one of the things that they also mentioned to me, is that the higher you go, the tougher it gets, and that's where you need the collective. And part of the things that I would have, you know, that I would tell my younger self is, do it at a lower level, you know, even in middle management, to start doing it from there, so that when it gets there, you've already got, you know, you're already in it, you've already got the hang of this thing. And I think, you know, at Accenture, you know, I had women that I could lean on. We had a group of women. It wasn't a big group. It was 3 women that we used to talk about some of our challenges. We shared most of these. We supported each other. If there are opportunities, then we get one of us into that. We help each other. We shape our careers so that when you get to a promotion level, we've really we've got an opportunity, so that if all of us do well, then at least one of us can move up, and then they can go create space for all of us, you know. So if we can support each other, at least one of us can elevate to the next level, you know, to the next level, and they can bring each other up. And even at AGSA as well, that's what I also tried to do. It was one of the things that I'm passionate about is public sector, because of its impact into our communities and into the country itself. And you know, I was coming in from private sector and wanting to create the change that's required in that space. And there was a number of us who were coming from a private, you know, sector that were struggling really to you know, to really adapt to the culture of that environment. And I got together a couple of women and other women even outside from our unit, and making sure that we can then, you know, seek ways to create the change that we need to. So in all of my spaces, I've always tried to bring in a group of women that we can then support each other and guide each other on how to navigate this. And part of it is to inspire one another, right? And part of it is also to bring each other up, because it's key for us that even if we're at a management level, we also seek to lift other women up, so that we can try and teach them and inspire them to also pursue those kind of objectives when we get into the work environment. And the most important thing is build a network. Build a network of people that you can go to. I've built network even at the client environment, so that it's women that you can always reach out to, and that, you know, you can still talk to about challenges. You can still speak to if you need, for example, our work. I'm a consultant. It's people that you can reach out to that can give you work, right? So it's about expanding your network as well. So it's important that we do that. On the last question around what hasn't worked and what has worked, I think the one thing that, and I think Ntato touched on, we must have you know, it needs to have a common set of vision, right? And of values that you work towards, because I've realized that it worked well in some of the, you know, the two groups that I've mentioned. We had the same common vision that this is where we want to get to. I mean, with the three ladies that then moved from Accenture at that time and went into another consulting company, they've succeeded, you know, they've gone to directorship in those spaces, and they've succeeded in that because they realize the power in the collective, you know. So you must have a common set of vision that this is what we want. This is what we want to change in the workplace, which is important, and not to think short term. You know, not to think short term, think long term, think about, you know, a sustainable change that you want to do. And also, in some instances, what didn't work is the competition that comes up with women. I don't know what it is sometimes, you know, but, you know, that never works. And it's about pursuing the right objectives as a collective, and making sure that we've got a good support system that we need to work towards. And I think, yeah, and I think that I can summarize it as that. Okay.
Wow. Fortunately for me today, I've got somebody else who's doing that job of trying to pull all that you have said. I mean, my mind is really buzzing to hear. I mean, hearing the kind of stuff that you are both sharing. Thank you so much, Lebu, for that. And I think, I know that we've had two people speaking with us quite a lot. But first, before we can invite other people to come on board, I just want to invite Riki to just say what she's been hearing, so that we can go straight into the discussion. We've got a very vibrant Zoom chat, and I'm not sure what's happening on Facebook, but thank you so much to both of you for all those thoughts and sharing your own experiences and being honest as well about them. Yeah, so Ricky, do you want to unmute?
Good evening, everybody. It's so lovely to join you guys and to be part of the discussion tonight. My job tonight is to summarize the discussion so far and to pull out some of the key themes that have been shared with us by our panelists. I want to first say that I love the use of this storytelling, which is a key and amazing methodology that we always use at Womaniko. We always move from the self and our stories and our experiences, because that teaches us so much for ourselves, and it is a place where you meet and align with others. In trying to pull together some of the themes of what has been discussed, just to give our discussion a sense of direction, I want to start by what Lebu referred to as the powerful her story of the impact of collective power. And she referred to how collective power and collective action amongst women has managed to do such amazing change in the world. And so that's the big answer to why. Because when we work together, we can have bigger impacts than when we're working alone. And then moving on to when Tato talked about, I loved Tato's story about how COVID-19 has normalized family. Earlier in the series, when we started to talk about the impacts of COVID-19, there were a couple of myths that we busted. And the one myth that we busted was a work-life balance. We talked about how we realized that there wasn't a real work-life balance in the first place. We were busy fighting, we were busy buying services in order to maintain that work-life balance. And so there's so much that we've learned about through COVID-19 as women. We have learned, for example, that mother shaming is not a thing. And I think when we talk about women as allies and collective action going forward, one of the big baseline platforms we should be looking at is, what are we no longer willing to go back on? I mean, can you imagine what we've learned when Tata talks about the 7-year difference between Shane for bringing her child to work and everyone understanding that she has to go and wipe the bum? One bottom line that we have is what we make sure that we don't fall back on now when we're in the process of returning to the workplace. We have to make sure we don't go back to mother shaming. We have to make sure we don't lose the gains that we have developed in terms of understanding that a full human being is also a parent, is also a sister, is also a wife, a partner, and that does have a place in the workplace, and that the workplace can hold understanding for that. So I think that for me stood out as a very powerful kind of platform, that having experienced all that we've experienced through the lockdown is some of the stuff that we can't let go of and return to the old norm. It's the stuff that defines the new norm, right? That, oh, now that we've learned, we're not going to return to the end, to the way we were before. And then I think both ladies were very powerful in giving us examples of how they have built collective power in the workplace, informal and formal ways. So you have the more formalized ways, like Women in Energy, that has been put together as a particular group and that has found kind of an organizational form. And you've got the more informal ways that Lebu talks about, where actually just as the woman in the workplace, you agree to collaborate and you agree to work with each other and you agree to support each other. I think for me, the most important point that came out is it starts with you. It starts with you, your self-understanding, your willingness to be courageous in reaching out to others. Lebu said you must understand the power within yourself. You must address your own biases so you can recognize on what your own value of success is. That way you can have honest conversations with others. Ntato built very beautifully on that once you've sorted yourself out, then you can be very discerning about who you choose to partner with, and that they're very different kinds of partners. You can collaborate, which is just, let's work together on this particular thing, and it's not necessarily a long-term a strategy. You can have allies who are people who will support you in all the elements of what you're trying to do. You can have sponsors who are people who have more power than you. You have champions who are people with even greater power. So understanding the landscape and being very realistic about the fact that even though I understand myself, it doesn't mean that just because we are all women, we're all in the same place and we all have a shared understanding. So I think holding on to that courage and that honesty to be able to have honest conversations, because the discernment, as Nthato said, is built on understanding character, understanding the values, and then building common interests and common goals. Nthato then moved on to really challenge you and say, more than agreeing to work together is the hard work of aligning and journeying together. Journeying together means like the day-to-day stuff of making things work, not the big principle stuff of we agree we should be working together. And she put it very nicely that it takes a lot of courage. You have to suspend your own goals and ambitions sometimes for greater goals or for common goals and ambitions, or to walk at the pace that is comfortable to all. She says you have to suspend your own patience. That means wanting things to happen in your own time. Sometimes when you're working as a group, I know there's an African saying that if you want to move quickly, move alone. But if you want to move in a group, then you can't pace at the pace that you would pace as an individual. And recognizing that and holding on to the patience. And then she says the courage to suspend your own judgment as well. And that means that recognizing that everyone's not always going to be on the same page, and you have to do the work to keep people on the same page. In terms of the lessons that both speakers shared, I think the importance, Nthato raised the importance of understanding males as allies in the workplace and recognizing that they do have a role to play, and cultivating males as allies. And then what she said is that it's very important to know that you cannot do it alone. So there is value in mobilizing, and you have to mobilize. What you can achieve alone, even if you're the most powerful in an organization, is limited in the context of what you can achieve collectively. And here, for example, she gave the example of the pay gap, the gender pay gap in her company, that when it becomes a big issue and an issue that's highly contested and that has material impacts, it is very hard for one woman to drive it through alone. And there is a need for kind of collective support. Lebu shared with us some of the lessons of what doesn't work. And she said that the element of competition amongst women can undo collectives and can undo collective power. And so there's a need and a value to check that. And I think it's really great that Nthato told us how to check that, when she said you have to learn how to suspend some of your things in order for the broader collective to work. So that's my summary of the discussions we've had. I think that we have raised a lot of thought and a lot of ideas, but essentially the most powerful thought is it starts with you. And the Reimagine series hasn't just been about reimagining, it's also been about self-empowerment, getting to grips with yourself and your context and your challenges. And when you have that understanding of self, you're then in a position to reach out and to organize and mobilize and work with the other women in your organization. I would really love to hear stories from the participants on the call of their own successes, of their own challenges they face, and maybe ideas of what they can do now going forward. With that, I'm going to hand over to Shay. Shay, you're going to share with us what's been going on in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. So this has been so great. Thank you, Nthato and Lebo. This has been awesome. What I'm going to do firstly is just shoot out one of the questions that are here, and maybe we can just get into conversation. And then as questions pop up, please put them on the chat, or you could raise your hand. We're happy to field questions amongst the participants in the room right now. So let me read the first question. So it comes from Score, and she says, Nthato, I'd like to know your input on discerning who to lean into in the workplace, and how do you note the varying interests of women? I think that's such an important question. I think We don't all know how to operate in that spirit of discernment. I know that I can sometimes make a big boo-boo out of who I go and speak to and realize like, oh my gosh, how do I now have a knife in my back? So I think this is such a pertinent question for us as women to learn, how do we do discernment? So I'm gonna give it back to Lebo or Ntata to feel that.
So I was always taken by Sheryl Sandberg's leaning in, but then you have to apply it, you know, practically in the moment. And we must remember that the personal is political. There's nothing apolitical about being a woman in the workplace. It is a political act to even be in the workplace. And so when we are in our environments, then we need to engage in those environments and look for the politics. I know a lot of people say, no, I'm not political. I don't want to get into the politics of the workplace. No, it is a political space. It is a political environment. By virtue of even working, you're a political agent, meaning you have to look at people's behaviors and their track record. And one of the ways to discern who you can lean into is by discerning how have they engaged in the workplace? Are they a woman who shows up from a position of power, always in isolation? So is this a queen bee syndrome? You can see all the syndromes. They're very easy to see. You get the queen bees, you get the patriarchal princesses, you get people who operate through shaming other women. I mean, your first way you can assess who to lean into and who not to lean into is who shames as a way of managing their positionality in the organization. Who slut shames, who mother shames, who single woman shames, who age shames, who experience shames, who sexuality shames, right? Because the opposite of shame is courage. And people who are courageous in the workplace are the ones who are able to suspend their own personal interests, step out of their boxes, and do stuff within the collective interest. They're the ones who speak up. They're the ones who are not afraid of being criticized. They're the ones who always have a much bigger, broader agenda than themselves. Whereas the shamers are usually very self-interested, self-narrowed, and self-focused. So that's one of the indications that I've always used to determine who do I ally with or collaborate with in the organization, which sometimes means that the most powerful woman might not be your ally. Because usually the most powerful woman has risen to the top and through power through a lot of the shaming space, the queen bee syndrome, and some of the other syndromes I'm talking about. That doesn't necessarily mean that queen bees can't be challenged and can't be leaned into. I'll give you an example of the champion for the women in energy, Priscilla, who's outgoing CEO of BP. She was the only Black female CEO of an oil company in South Africa. I just happened to be sitting on a board with her. And one day I took courage and I said to her, you know, Priscilla, how does it feel being the only one? I mean, really, are you comfortable being the only one? And she had the humility and courage to say back to me, it's a very comforting space to be in, but it's extremely lonely and it's extremely painful. And that was the basis in which we started Women in Energy. Now, not all people have that level of consciousness to hold those two polarities in their minds to say, okay, I've got positional power. And then actually, the more I am an individual, the more I position myself through making sure no other woman can compete in the space except for me, the further I will advance. Some people are able to hold that with the concept of, but at the same time, the closer I get to the top, I'm reaching diminishing marginal utility here, because ultimately I'll hit my peak. I'll have no track record, no legacy. I'll have a bunch of broken women's bodies around me. And I might have been queen bee for a moment, but I would have left nothing behind. So it's important to also step out and have those conversations, to challenge people directly about their principles and their values. So I would suggest always look for the difference between what drives someone. Are they a shamer or are they a courageous person? And also have those crucial and brave conversations to test people around their principles and their values.
Great. Lebo, do you want to come in? Want to say something?
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I love what Ntato was saying about, you know, it's about observing, right? The values that, you know, each woman aspire to. I mean, when I arrive in an organization, that's what I look at, right? That's what you look at. Okay, there's some, and you engage in a conversation. You know, for me, I'm never scared to engage in a conversation. I usually have a chat, you know, with the CEO, understand where they want to take the organization, understand how I fit into that vision. And part of that conversation is then knowing where and the challenges, because at times what we miss, what we see, we miss the stories, the war stories behind the woman that's leading this change. I mean, when I joined the previous organization that I've been in, this is a CEO that came in, and it was just, the organization was very patriarchal in nature. It was a 100-year-old organization, and EXCO was full of men, and she came in as she came in as, I would say, a COO of some sort. Yeah, a COO. I would equate it to a COO position, but it was a national leader. And then what she did, she then envisioned that she's going to make sure that there's women representative in EXCO. And that's what she did. And it was a long journey. She had to go through a lot of challenges to make that happen. But I think what I want to highlight is that every woman has a story. And at times, yes, that story might not be clean, but we need to understand sometimes their objective and their purposes to which they've endeavored into where they are. And I tried not to be judgmental, as much as some of the values might not be what one would aspire to, but I think it's to learn from every woman and be willing to take what you can, you know, from each and every woman that you encounter, as opposed to judging. But I think, yes, as much as you want to collaborate with women, it's about understanding which woman has the values to which you want to aspire to. I think principles is key. For me, I'm a Christian. I aspire to Christian values. I don't separate myself on a Sunday and during the week. For me, it's consistent every way. And that's what I live. Well, that's how I live, and that's how I conduct myself even in a workplace. So it's important for you to look at those values and to look at which women you can collaborate on based on those common set of values and principles. And yeah, and that's how we differentiate it. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just going to invite the people in the call to just jump in. I think the question that I would want to ask you, so that we're not only hearing from a few people, is you've listened to Lebu and Tato speaking to us about so many important things. I love what you're talking about here, like in terms of observing and looking for the politics, because a lot of us, like, we go into the workplace and we tell ourselves that I'm only here to work and that's it. And you don't want to concern yourself with actually what is going on in the organization, even though it has got direct impacts on you as a person. I actually think that is very, very helpful. And the whole thing around shaming, and observing who uses shaming and all that. And perhaps later, Ntato and Lebu, you will come back and talk to us about how to build this courage, because I know that, like, if you think about it, it's not every woman who can actually go and challenge a Queen Bee, or who can just go and approach a CEO. How do you build that courage and that resilience as well? I think it was talking about the fact that mobilizing and organizing amongst women is a painful process, a long process. Which actually means you do need to have resilience. But don't answer that now. You can actually mull over those questions whilst we are inviting other people to actually come and share their stories. You've heard them. What resonates with you? What's your own story? Okay, I'm not able to see if there are any hands up. Perhaps whilst we are still thinking, you can just share about the poll.
I can go. I can
Okay.
comment.
Great.
Can I just make a quick comment? Firstly, I think thank you very, very much, beautiful ladies, Tato and Lebo. I mean, it's just so excellent to hear women who are trying to navigate through different workspaces and the power play. I think some of the things that I'll be really, really brief. Some of the things that are coming through for me, and which I also spoke about last week, is about creating your own power, building it and owning it through the different types of power that we spoke about. And I think it connects very well with what Tato was saying, that you need to find collaborators, but you need to be the first collaborator yourself. You cannot create collaborators if you're not a collaborator yourself. And what that means is that you need to examine your values, your attitudes, and all these other things, because you can't ask accountability in someone when you're not accountable yourself. So I think creating that collaboration with self first. And this is what I call agency or self-belief, where you begin to think about, what power do I have? Can I make decisions as a person at the level that I am? What kind of power do I need to navigate through so I can create that influence that is required to collaborate with others? I really like the idea that collective power starts with you. Yes, it does start with you. But what is important is that we can talk about collective power as much as we want, but it can only be effective if we have allies or collaborators who share the same values and share the same ideologies, share the same interests. So I heard a story about Martin Luther King that he filled the stadium, the Madison Square Garden were filled with people, even when he did not announce that he was going to make a speech there. Why? It's only because people shared his values about humanity, his values about his beliefs about, equal rights and all of that stuff. So if people know that you are a person that believes in certain ethos, they will definitely follow you, and you can begin to create your own power from that perspective. So I really, really like this idea of collective power and how we can navigate through the workplace and other parts of our lives. So thank you, ladies. It's been really, really awesome. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Bobs, for adding that and just picking up exactly where you left last week and how we're building on that. And I think it's so important. Never, you said something that we've mentioned a couple of weeks ago as well. We unpacked a whole series around 3 weeks we spent just working on values. What are values? What are your particular values? And then how do those values play out in the workplace? And how do you find aligned values? And I think we were talking organizationally around it, but I think in finding collaborators and sponsors in the workplace to find value aligned work, people who are value aligned with you. And I think what you said is also so critical is, can you also be an authentic person? Can the values that you live out on a Sunday be the values that you live out on a Monday? Can we show up into spaces as real people with real values, rather than at work I'm a different person and at home I'm another person, and then at church I'm somebody else? And so I so love that, because it rings true to the message of, can you be an authentic person that shows up in every space consistently the same person? Because that's when people then want to work with you. They want to collaborate with you. I'm gonna remind you that the poll is up. We just have 13 of you of the 21 that's engaged it. So if you can and you want, please do just give us some input there. That will really help. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to read some comments that are in the chat. But maybe before I do that, we should cross over to Kateko, who's fielding the Facebook live chat for us. So Kateko, do you have anything there that we should be aware of? Is Kateko here?
Yeah, I'm here. Just a few comments on the Facebook chat. No question. But Barbara has already said that she was Okay, she said great experience on the collective power that can be achieved. And Bongi was saying power starts with yourself, knowing your purpose and strength. So no questions on the Facebook. I hope I'm not missing any questions here.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll just read a comment, some of the comments that I hear. Pussy Siwe said something that was so cool. When you started off in Tatu, you spoke about how the workplace has become normalized. And I so love that. I love how COVID has up-leveled us in many ways. And she speaks here about how just 2 days ago, the executive in her workplace decided that suitable work plans for all employees who are taking care of minors has to be put in place because ECD centers are not yet operational. And yet, before COVID, this was a problem for an employee, and you were a mom and you figured it out, and you don't have to bring that issue to work. But it's amazing how now with the situation that we have, it's everyone's issue, and people understand how your work and your home life and your work life are fully intertwined. And then I'm going to read, okay, so Barbara commented as well, and I think, Barbara, you've already highlighted some of it, but it's about how do we move beyond just supporting one another and start to learn to affirm ourselves? So how do you have that self-belief and agency so that you can be able to make decisions that affect your life well, but then also have implications for others at large? And then Michelle, welcome Michelle, nice for you to join us once again. She said one of the things Lebo said, I think, what is really important is that if one of us can elevate to the next level and create space for the rest of us to succeed, then we all are winning. And she said that she loved that. And I think I love that too. I think it's so important that when you win, I win, that your success is my success, and that we don't have to have this competitive behavior or cattish behavior that somehow seems to be inherited, I don't know from where, and we bring it and we play it out in the workplace. And so, yes. So,
I'm on to
yes, please go for it.
So I think one of the beliefs is that, and it places an extraordinary amount of pressure on women who are progressing, is the belief is that the progressing woman needs to enable and create space for everybody while managing her own progression, while managing all the barriers and constraints that she has to face. And I want to challenge and say, I think that every woman can create space where she is, not just in the upward progression. About 18 months ago, I started feeling very challenged because I was not able to have the career path that I wanted for myself. And I started getting itchy feet. I'm sure we can all relate to this. You're not getting the promotions you're looking for. You're not successful in your interviews. You're not getting the roles and assignments you want. And so the organization, I wanted to leave. And this just so happened at the same time where there was complete contraction in the job market as well. So I'm on the market. I'm wanting to leave. I think I'm the most brilliant woman. I'm the bee's knees. I'm not getting any new jobs, and I'm not managing to work up the career ladder. And one of the things I came to understand was that, okay, I don't feel anybody's mentoring me. I don't feel I'm championed or sponsored. So I'm either going to sit here and be extremely unhappy, or I'm going to do what nobody's doing for me. And in that space, I realized that if we extend our own space, if we do what is not being done for us, we start creating the very movement that we're looking for because we get recognized for doing it. You start building communities of practice. You start to build new networks within the organization. You start to be recognized as a leader instead of having whatever that self-interest was. So I do want to encourage and say, there's a very unnice part of this collective stuff and the women working through the workplace stuff. And that's the discomforts, that's the blockages, that's the constraints, that's the contradictions, that's the contestations. And when we hit those tough places, I think this speaks to the question someone asked earlier about where do you get the courage and resilience from? When we hit those tough spaces, the gut instinct is always to leave and to find a better, easier space. And I think that's the spaces where we need to lean into ourselves and challenge ourselves to work through it. You know, you have to work through the pain. You have to walk through the pain and grow comfortable with that discomfort. And when we do that, we acquire new capabilities and new skill sets and new forms of resilience to survive and live in the eye of the storm, essentially. I just wanted to answer part of the previous question around how do you build that courage and how do you build that resilience? By failing all the time, by not getting what you want, by being extremely frustrated, and by not running away from it. Yeah.
Oh, Tato, I'm actually laughing inside because that's encouraging, right? To say we will actually fail. But I think what you're saying, it goes back to what we always say in most of these conversations. What's your why? Yeah, because when our why is strong, then we are actually able to push through even when things are not easy. But I think I like that, because honestly speaking, we can live here thinking that, I'm just gonna go and organize, it's gonna be easy. It is not easy. It is not easy. And I think that's a message that we are actually hearing. But that does not necessarily mean we must not do what we believe we need to do. I see that Jess and Ricky have got their hands up.
Can I go? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jess.
So thank you to the two speakers. It's really been insightful and I love the conversation. I would like to hear from you guys. We're speaking a lot around the outwardness of what we need to be achieving. And Lebu, I like how you brought the self first. The question that I'm gonna ask is, for us to first go out there, we have to ground ourselves first. In other words, the balancing of the roles that we are playing first, the fact that you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a sister, and all of that. And the fact that if that's not balanced or you're not dealing with that, that's going to also impact you. And because we talk about health and all of that. So can you guys can you share with us, how are you in your journey in progressing and achieving all the successes that you've achieved? How are you dealing? And if you can probably help some of us in terms of how we deal with the self, the balance, the roles, and yeah, that's my thoughts.
Before Ricky comes in, I just want to bring two more questions, and before Tato and Lebu answer, there's a question on Facebook, which also came. It's a similar question to what came up last week, which I picked up today. So that's why I'm actually wanting to bring that in before you come in, Ricky. The question of last week first was a question about, I mean, if you create these coalitions and, like collective groups with women, is that not going to be seen as you are creating cliques and therefore push away certain people? So that was a question from last week. Today, Semi is asking, is there a way to build these coalitions without seeming to be antagonistic to men in general? And I think these are some of the fears that people always have. So perhaps it doesn't have to be the two of you who respond to that question.
You know what? These are such good questions. Sorry, Lebu, I just have to jump in here. The first one is, Nyarai, hello, darling. I haven't seen you in forever, and thank you.
I knew you would love that question.
You know what? The reality is, right, the language of self-love and self-care has only become a common language in the last 18 to 24 months. I'm not sure about the women in this call, but I'm one of those women, intellectual women, I think and I feel with my head. And so if I don't even have a language for something, there's cognitive dissonance. I did not have a language for self-love, for self-care, and for selfishness until I had a number of personal, emotional collapses in my life, right? And so sometimes it takes depression, it takes a failed marriage, it takes failed relationships, it takes fundamental deconstruction and loss in your spiritual, personal, in your psychosocial space in order to wake you up to the need for self-replenishment, self-love, and self-care, and selfishness, not just in the workplace, but in the home environment too. Because as women, we are conditioned from day one to serve and to add value, but not to build and generate and replenish ourselves. I think that is such a crucial question. I'm 42 this year, and I honestly can say I only started investing in myself from a self-love perspective about 18 months ago. And that's after my second failed marriage. So it is a journey to get to that place. And one of the things we can do as women, because often when we speak about the workplace and women's collectives, we don't have open, honest conversations with each other around the basics, such as, are you being kind to yourself? Are you being good to you? How are you being with yourself? We have these broad, big ideals, political ideals in the workplace, but the self is the first developmental terrain, I think just, if I can just answer the second question, hi guys, can you hear me?
Okay, you have to start, Ntato, because you are on mute.
Gosh, and it was such pearls of wisdom, they're gone now. Guys, did you hear anything I said?
No, it was just on the second point. You were going to a second point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you guys heard about the self-care and self-love?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, that was the pearls of wisdom. Okay. The second point around being perceived as nice. I do think as women, we need to absolve ourselves of this niceness concept. It is a patriarchal concept. Part of showing up as your authentic self is showing up in all of your fabulous imperfection and being non-negotiable about that, and stepping out into space in all of yourself, and people having to learn to accept you for that. Because the risk is, if we are walking into our workplaces or even our home lives or our relationships with masks on, eventually they will crumble and we will be unable to sustain that form of identity. And so in my experience, I have found that it is extremely important to be firm in my identity as a Black single mother in the workplace, and to speak from that position of experience, and to engage and lobby and advocate from that position, and not be worried about what the other feels about it, because I've been otherized my whole life in the workplace. If that voice does not find location, then I would be buying into my own assimilation and subjugation in the workplace. I'll give you an example. I had to manage a bromance. I call them bromances. You know those male coalitions in the workplace where they form and triangulate around you? You could have one in your team and others in other teams, and then they're just working around you. It influences the performance management process. You can't get the person to report to you properly. They're busy working outside your team to other people. I had this bromance I had to deal with once. One of the guys was in South Africa, the other one was in London, etc. And I would be undermined in my own meetings. They would just talk around me, talk over me. And I would sit there as this representative Black woman manager, and then the bromance is going on. They'd even made arrangements and agreed on the outcomes of meetings outside of me as a line manager. And I remember once having to put down my foot in a meeting and having to stand up and say, first of all, when you repeat what I have said and you summarize it, you assume that you can appropriate my IP and better present it as a male and be recognized for that. Second of all, when you've made decisions and invite me here to rubber stamp them, you're undermining my authority as a woman. And then third of all, as long as you're going to behave like this, don't waste my time with another meeting. And I walked out. Now, at the time, I was in my emotional space and I was very entitled to it. Ricky can tell you how there's points where my logic just fails and then I go into, at that moment, as I walked out, I realized that could be career limiting. Why? Because the bromance is going to connect with the bigger bromance, and then Ntato's going to be seen as this emotional manager, an emotional woman who can't manage in the workplace, and she storms out of meetings and she effectively tells people to fuck off in relationships, in meetings. But what actually happened was after the meeting, they came and apologized because they hadn't been held accountable ever. Because women are so afraid of being their authentic selves and expressing their emotions and expressing their experiences in the workplace that we even become complicit with environments that undermine us. I'll leave it there.
Oh my goodness. Now I need to ask for permission from you. We are at 2 minutes to 6. So we're supposed to be ending our conversation. I don't know, you need to guide me. Ricky's hand is still up. You have not shared your stories. Skolela's hand is up as well. So I don't know, you need to guide me. What do we do? I still want to hear as well from Lebu. And we still have a poll that we need to share with you. So what do we do? Give us an indication. Should we take another, there's somebody suggesting 5 more minutes? Can you vote there and tell us whether that is okay for you? Okay, 5 to 10 more minutes. What, can we do that? Sure, thank you. Ricky, please come in and then, okay, we'll give it 10 minutes. So if you can just come up, Ricky, and then Lebu, you can say something and then I'll give over to Cher to go into the poll.
Thembela, I don't want to break the momentum of the discussion. Can I come in just before Cher closes?
Okay. Sorry, I just like that, call it out. Instead of sitting in a space where you know it is not serving you, call it out. But I don't know, Lebu, you might want to come in on that because Ntato has already answered the question I had asked about how to build this resilience and all that. How do you call it out? When because again, I want to go back to the issue that made us to come into this whole conversation around building collective power and tapping into that. So how do you call it out when you are sitting there and you are fearful about your job and all that? So what do we do?
Maybe let me come in. I'll also go back to Jess's question as well. I think that's very courageous, what Ntato will do. And I've always done that, you know, and as I said, you know, the organization that I worked in, you know, recently, it was very patriarchal in nature. I think there was this gentleman who has a PA or was working towards his PhD. He thought he is the, you know, the star of the show and was very rattled when this woman comes and this woman kind of, you know, challenges him on a number of things. And that got him very rattled, you know, and that's the thing with men at times. You need to stand up. You need to be courageous. Obviously, I understand, you know, at times you need to know when to do so and when not to. And I actually love you know, the honesty part of it and be willing to be, you know, to be yourself at that point in time. And I think I've allowed myself to be that. And I think, you know, coming into my, you know, I turned 40 this year. I realized the importance of that, of being honest with yourself. And it goes back to self-care. As a mother of 3, I had challenges as well around that. Being honest with myself about my feelings at that point, about my weaknesses at that point. And I am now so comfortable with that, that you're willing to stand out. You're willing to say when things are acceptable and when things are not acceptable. And whether men are comfortable with that and they're comfortable or not, or uncomfortable with that, it's up to them. But we need to be honest in those, in that table where we sit in a meeting, and be honest with things, and I think it's important. Obviously, it's important to discern. I go back to discerning. It's important to discern, but we need to be courageous. It starts with us. And I want to go back to, maybe let me start with balancing and the roles that we occupy as women. I think the key thing, it starts with values. It starts with priorities. And and most importantly, it's you. I've made sure, even when I got married, to make sure that I keep relationships, and Jessica will tell you, she's a very close friend of mine. We met at work 12 years ago. Those are the networks that you build as you go along. And it's important. That's why collective, I believe in Women Collective, because it's those networks. And I've built those networks of powerful women, and women that I would work with in this journey as you go along, and that you will go out and meet and talk about these challenges and encourage one another, empower one another, and be able to go back in the workplace and change things. So that is important. So it's about knowing these roles, your role as a mom, your role as a wife, and being conscious and intentional about what it is that you want to achieve with each of those roles. I'm a sister. I've got a little sister. I'm also got an older brother. I'm a daughter as well. So it's important for us to make sure that we balance all of these roles as we go along. And it also goes back to what your priority is as a person, and make sure that you review that all the time, with your husband, and say, are you in the same place with your husband? Does he know where you're trying to get to? Your family, all of those. And it's not an easy journey. At some point, some things will kind of, slack behind a little bit, but you need to always catch up on and make sure that you check yourself all the time. I write journals all the time, and journals help me to reflect. So I believe in reflection, or reflecting all the time in terms of where you are, what's important to you. And I started with what your definition of success is, which is very important, because that will then direct your journey. I might not be where I want to be in terms of a position and all of that, but you need to be content. All the time, check yourself that you're content with where you are in all spheres of your life, and your life as a woman. And the key thing that I wrote in my notes is endurance. And I think endurance talks to resilience that you're talking to. It's a long journey, right? It's a long journey. Let's not want to rush there. And while in the rush, then certain things drops. We don't want things to drop on the floor. We want to be able to juggle all of them depending on the priorities at that point in time. So make sure that you pace yourself. Make sure that you have the cheerleaders along the way, because it can be a demoralizing journey. It can be it can deplete you emotionally, but make sure that you check, you reflect as you go along all the time, and go for that massage, go for that, take care of yourself, go do your nails once in a while. I always tell that to my friends, take care of yourself, because it starts with you, as I said, and that's important. And I think that's how when you go back to yourself, that's how you build the courage back, from yourself and from the network of women around you that will also help you and cheer you on as you go on this journey. I think that's where I want to leave it.
Great. Thank you. I think we could keep going for another 30 minutes, and I'm sure we'll still hold the attention of everybody in the room. But I think we must honor your time and your responsibilities. And so I'm quickly going to share the poll results with you. So number one was, how many women consciously collaborate together in the workplace? 64% said yes, that women do consciously collaborate together in your workplace. Secondly, we went on to say that if you had answered yes to question one, is it successful? Are those collaborative initiatives successful? And 64% of the 36 that said yes, said 64% said it's in between. So they're not sure whether it's good or it's bad, or it's successful or not, which is quite interesting. Number three was, do you find it more approachable to work with men or women or both in the workplace? And the results show that 50% say, so 50% of you said that it's easy to work with both men and women. You find it supportive for both. And the final one was, do you have the confidence to collaborate with other women in the workplace? And a stark 86% said yes. So what interests me about this poll, and we will pull out the results and give you some analysis on it, but I think the first thing that stands out to me is 86% of us says that we have the confidence to collaborate, and yet we are saying at the same time that 64% of us don't consciously collaborate in the workplace. That means if we have the confidence, what's the gap between us consciously doing this? So I think that's something interesting for us to note. And Thembela is drawing on these data, and she will pull it together. We are going to do some analysis and repackage it and give it back to you. But thank you for those who did participate and give us information or give us data on that. So finally, I think we are drawing to a close, and I think Ricky wanted to say something. So I'm going to give it back to Ricky to do that, and then we'll close up quickly.
Thanks, Cher. Actually, my comments build very much on what you're saying. Listening to the conversation, there are two things that stood out for me. The one that I think we need to hold on to and not let go of too easily is what have been the gains of COVID-19 and the lockdown. And I don't think that's a conversation that we've had, right? We've mostly talked about what are the challenges are and how we're managing and surviving. But we haven't talked about what are the gains from the workplace and how do we make sure we protect those gains. And I think that's an important place of power for women in the workplace to say, if we could tolerate in the lockdown, these circumstances and these realities, we needn't be stepping back from them. So the example that was given during the discussion about now workplaces are more conscious of the reality and the lived experience of parenting. So I think that's something that's important for us to carry forward. Another thing that stood out for me was the importance of interventions like our fireplace discussions. Because if you're talking about collaborating amongst women, building collective power, getting to know each other, connecting, building the kind of trust that it takes to work with each other. That's what our fireplace discussions, that's the kind of space that we were developing with our fireplace discussions. So for me, I think it's important for us to hold on to that work that we started as Womaniko of how do we create those kind of spaces. And that might be the gap between we have the courage, but we don't consciously, is that we don't know how to consciously. And what Womaniko has been working on is this methodology, this way of doing it in the workplace. I didn't want us to lose those two important points today. Thanks, Cher.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ricky, for highlighting that. Yes, we do hold these amazing fireplace conversations. It's now it's time for us to make toasty fires and start it now in the winter time. So we'll definitely tell you more about them. So one of the things I wanted to just bringing us to a close, someone who's on the chat just sent me a message and said, there's a lot of terms that Natasha used that we're not familiar with, like bromance and mansplaining and shame and mother shaming. And you know, it's true. I mean, unless you're in the space and you're hearing this and you're reading, it's not always familiar stuff. And one of the things I hadn't noticed is I could be in a conversation and yeah, there is mansplaining going on, but until I was aware of what that was, I could call it out and say, oh, was I not clear? Did you need to repackage that? But I couldn't call it out until I knew what that was. And so I think that's something for us to think about here at Women Equal. Like, are we also bringing you these terms, and are we unpacking what it is? Because you can't call it out if you can't actually identify it. So we'll definitely look at a way in which we can help you with that, so that you start to identify these very unhealthy behaviors that our male counterparts start to make. They do it, and sometimes unconsciously even. So with that, I wanted to just end it. I know this week you must have been bombarded with all kinds of social media around George Floyd and really what's going on in America. And it's not just an American issue. Obviously, it's a worldwide issue. Inequalities exist and prejudice exists across the globe. And it's something that we live with here in South Africa on a continual basis. And I thought in you looking at all of these social media feeds and doing your own Blackout Tuesdays and like talking about privilege and what that might mean, I read something in the week that I thought was so interesting for us to end off, just so that you could reflect on this in the week going ahead. Bonnie Mbuli said something. She said, in America, people are thinking about how unsafe it is to be Black, to be African American in America. But she was trying to think about what could that actually feel like in South Africa. And the best way, she said, she could explain what an African American person could be feeling is what a woman in South Africa feels continuously. And so I know that all of these issues are being raised, and I just want you, as you look at all these different stuff coming up in the media, think about it. How am I being violated as a woman in South Africa every time something happens? And there's a big uproar right now, but can I always take it back to saying, am I looking at the inequalities, the injustices, the privileges that exist that disadvantage me as a woman in South Africa? Because yes, just walking out at night as a woman is not safe. Being stopped by the police is not safe. Being stopped by a white male sometimes is not safe. Working in the workplace with male and female white individuals sometimes is unsafe. And so there's lots of conversation going on, and obviously as Women Equal, we try and bring you as much value as we can. And so we hope that you will continue the conversation with us. We're always on Facebook. You know how to reach us on Facebook. We have a WhatsApp group. If you're not part of that, please reach out, drop your number for us in this chat box, and we're going to definitely add you to that group. Once again, thank you, Lebo and Ntatu. You guys are just powerhouses. Like Tembela said, you've just poured gold on us, and I think we have lots to reflect on and think on. And as Women Equal, we have our work cut out for us, clearly. And so with that, thank you so much for making the time. We honor you for that. And I'm going to say bye. Everyone can unmute themselves. You can say goodbye to us. You can put in your last minute facts and tell us what you think. And we'll find you back in the same place next week, Thursday, 4:30. This Zoom chat is waiting for you to come engage us and share your stories with us. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry for overshooting time today, but we think it was a valuable time for us to have spent together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are great.
Goodbye.
We could do with another session. And thank you.
I kind of feel that too, that this session is not over.